Captain and Tennille's unquestionable music chemistry and #1 records enchanted the world for decades. However, Toni Tennille has only just completely disclosed the hidden reality that was developing behind the songs and smiles. Fans perceived a loving couple, but the real story of the legendary Captain, Daryl Dragon, was far more nuanced. His hardships, his worst anxieties, and the tragic events that characterized their last years together present a picture that is very different from what the public thought. What did Tennille reveal following Dragon's death, and what was the accurate tale behind their marriage? Join us as we reveal the dramatic disclosures Toni Tennille has finally made and the little-known facts about their illustrious collaboration. Toni's early life. Catherine Antoinette Toni Tennille was born in Montgomery, Alabama on May 8, 1940. She was the oldest of 4 daughters in a creative and musical family. In addition to running a furniture business, her father, Frank Tennille, had a fascinating history as a vocalist with the well-known swing-era jazz group Bob Crosby's Bobcats. Toni was exposed to the world of broadcasting and performing through her mother, Catherine Wright, who hosted a daily television show in Montgomery for 5 years, bringing a new type of entertainment into the home. TV, theater, and music influenced Toni's upbringing, which influenced her future goals. She learned to play the piano young, demonstrating her early musical talent. It was more than classical instruction, though, since Toni's passion for jazz and big band music would later come through in her work. Her formative years in Montgomery laid the groundwork for her eventual lifetime career in entertainment. Musical roots. Toni's intense love for music was unsurprising, given that her father had been a professional musician. But Toni had a natural talent, so it wasn't just about following in his footsteps. She possessed an ear for melody that distinguished her from other young musicians, and she had taken piano lessons as a child. Her early exposure to jazz and big band music was one of the most influential events in her life. She frequently listened to recordings late into the night because she loved the styles of Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington, and Count Basie. Toni was more attracted to jazz's intricate harmonies and elaborate arrangements than many of her contemporaries, who were more interested in early rock and roll. By her teenage years, she had developed the unique ability to transcribe full orchestral arrangements by ear, which would later prove beneficial in her songwriting career, demonstrating that her interest was more than a pastime. Her profound musical origins prepared her for a career combining jazz, pop, and theater. College years. After graduating from Sidney Lanier High School, Toni studied classical piano and music composition at Auburn University. Despite her love of classical music, she never envisioned herself as a conventional concert pianist. Instead, she enjoyed performing and arranging music in various genres. She joined the renowned collegiate big band, the Auburn Knights, while she was a student at Auburn. She had never performed before a huge crowd, but this experience helped her overcome her stage fear. Additionally, it exposed her to live performance, something she would later become proficient in as a member of Captain and Tennille. However, her family's financial difficulties ended her college career. After being forced to drop out of school after 2 years, Toni put her aspirations to pursue a career in music on hold. But her time at Auburn had already influenced her path. She was a performer, an arranger, and a potential star, in addition to being a pianist. Move to California. Toni's life took an unexpected turn when her father's furniture company failed in 1959, forcing the Tennille family to relocate from Alabama to Balboa, California. Leaving the southern charm of Montgomery for the sun-drenched California coast, which was full of opportunity, was a drastic departure. Although the move initially appeared to be a setback, it eventually helped her musical career. In the 1960s, folk, rock, and jazz flourished on the West Coast, which was going through a cultural explosion. Toni was introduced to the entertainment world in Hollywood while living in California, and she discovered for the first time that there was a legitimate path for being a professional musician. She would finally meet Daryl Dragon in California, who would permanently alter her personal and professional lives. Before that, though, she had to deal with odd occupations and situations that would mold her fortitude and inventiveness. Early jobs. Like everyone else, Toni had to pay the bills before becoming well known. She held several positions in the early 1960s, first as a file clerk and then as a statistical analyst for the space exploration firm North American Rockwell Corporation. She knew the irony of working in such a technical subject because she had always considered herself an artist rather than a mathematician. Nevertheless, she learned discipline and attention to detail from the job, which would help her in the music industry later on, despite its strict structure. Toni's passion for music never diminished, and she continued to write songs and play the piano in the evenings despite working a full-time job. She was aware that she didn't belong in the corporate world. She was prepared to take advantage of any musical chance that presented itself. Theater involvement. In the late 1960s, while residing in Corona del Mar, Toni pursued artistic endeavors outside music and entered the theater industry. She joined South Coast Repertory, one of California's most prestigious regional theatrical groups. She gained a dominating presence from performing on stage, later assisting her as a musician in entrancing listeners. She also discovered the value of storytelling, which would influence her compositions and onstage personas with Captain and Tennille. She developed her stagecraft while working in theater by meeting with other actors, directors, and musicians. She gained a priceless skill set from her theater experience, distinguishing her from other musicians, even though her career never took off. She held an audience's interest and gave a simultaneously intimate and magnificent presentation. Mother Earth musical. Toni was given a unique chance in 1969, composing the music for Mother Earth, a bold new rock musical. Toni was the ideal composer to realize the director Ron Throsson's concept for an environmentally conscientious, socially concerned production. Toni gave the project her all, creating a score that combined jazz, folk, and rock elements. Due to its unique music and timely issues, the musical was a local success. After a brief engagement at the Belasco Theater in October 1972, Mother Earth finally made it to Broadway. Toni was no longer participating when it made it to Broadway, but she was still listed as the composer under her married name, Shearer. This was her first significant industry honor, demonstrating her ability to write music professionally. Mother Earth, however, was only the start. She soon met Daryl Dragon, and her career would take a turn that nobody could have foreseen, least of all her. Meeting Daryl Dragon. In 1971, Toni Tennille and Daryl Dragon met in San Francisco while trying out for the rock musical Mother Earth. Dragon, renowned for his flawless keyboard talents, was a member of the Beach Boys then. Tennille immediately drew his attention with her strong voice and imposing stage presence. Their mutual passion for music soon led to a solid business relationship, and Dragon asked Tennille to accompany the Beach Boys on tour as an extra keyboardist. This unforeseen opportunity gave Toni first-hand experience working with one of the most successful bands. It also signaled the start of an unbreakable relationship between her and Dragon, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most recognizable duos in pop music. Soon their connection would develop into something far more complex, combining their personal and musical lives in ways neither had foreseen. Daryl's musical heritage. Daryl Dragon's future in the music industry was virtually assured due to his remarkable musical heritage. Carmen Dragon, his father, was an Academy Award-winning film composer and conductor well known for his work on CoverGirl, 1944. Due to his mother's classical training, Eloise Rawitzer Dragon, music was always present in their home. Daryl grew up surrounded by classical music, orchestral arrangements, and Hollywood's musical elite. Yet he preferred modern rock and pop songs. Despite his classical training, Daryl was captivated by the developing technology of synthesizers and opted for the electronic keyboard over conventional symphonic instruments. His hallmark sound, which later defined Captain and Tennille's distinct sound, was his ability to combine contemporary rock rhythms with classical training. He never deviated from the discipline and musical accuracy that his father had taught him from a young age, even as he looked for his own identity outside the world of orchestras. The Captain moniker. Although it began as an inside joke, Daryl Dragon's stage character as the Captain became one of the most iconic images in pop music. Lead vocalist Mike Love jokingly called him Captain Keyboard while he was on tour with the Beach Boys due to his fondness for donning a captain's hat while performing. The hat became a permanent part of Dragon's identity as he embraced the role, and the name remained. He adopted the nickname when he and Toni Tennille formed their duo, formally identifying as Captain and Tennille. the hat evolved from a simple adornment to a representation of Dragon's enigmatic, reserved personality. Daryl was the quiet musical genius who frequently let his keyboard speak for him, while Toni was the vivacious and captivating half of the duet. Fans were drawn to their opposing personalities because of this interplay, with Toni's warmth and vivacity wonderfully balancing Dragon's aloof and mysterious demeanor. Touring with the Beach Boys. When Daryl Dragon became the touring keyboardist for the Beach Boys in 1967, his career changed dramatically. He immediately gained the group's respect for his creative use of electronic keyboards and his ability to live recreate the band's intricate harmonies. He significantly influenced how they performed live throughout his time with them, especially when Brian Wilson had stopped touring. Additionally, Dragon worked on several Beach Boys albums, such as Surf's Up, 1971, and Sunflower, 1970. His proficiency with the Moog synthesizer gave the band's developing song a new, contemporary tone. Despite his intense devotion to the Beach Boys, he ultimately felt compelled to follow his musical career. He left the band in the early 1970s to start a new adventure that would define his job because of his blossoming partnership with Toni Tennille. Formation of Captain and Tennille. Captain and Tennille's formation was more than just a musical collaboration. It was the beginning of a romance. Daryl Dragon and Toni Tennille started playing as a pair after becoming friends via their mutual love of music, initially accepting any available engagements. Their sound, a fusion of pop, rock, and jazz-infused piano arrangements, attracted attention fast, and their connection was evident. They started performing in lounges and tiny clubs, honing their craft and gauging the crowd's response. They were distinguished by Dragon's deft keyboard work and Tennille's soulful yet light-hearted vocals. They began recording their music as they gained popularity, and ultimately A&M Records took notice. When they recorded the song Love Will Keep Us Together, which would propel them into superstardom, it was their first significant break. This iconic act would define an era of pop music which began as two musicians experimenting with their sound. Breakthrough hit. It was nothing short of explosive when Love Will Keep Us Together was released in 1975. Neil Sedaka initially wrote and recorded the song, but Captain and Tennille gave it new life. Their rendition was lively, well-executed, and contagious. It perfectly encapsulated the pop and soul fusion that appealed to listeners everywhere. One of the decade's pivotal songs, the song shot to the top of the Billboard Hot 100 and remained there for 4 weeks. It was memorable due to the authentic connection between Tennille's emotive vocals and Dragon's skillful orchestration, not merely because of its catchy songs. The duo's affectionate yet light-hearted performance in the music video further enhanced the song's appeal, which cemented their reputation as a lively yet incredibly close musical combination. Their breakthrough single wasn't merely a one-time smash, it established the tone for their career and demonstrated that love could keep two people together in life and music. Grammy recognition. For Captain and Tennille, winning the 1976 Grammy Award for Record of the Year marked a turning point in their career. The accolade recognized their talent and the song's widespread appeal. With over 1 million copies sold and the pair receiving great praise, Love Will Keep Us Together had dominated the airways. It was particularly noteworthy for Toni Tennille, who had struggled to make a name for herself as a serious musician in a male-dominated field. The Grammy victory put Captain and Tennille on par with the biggest acts of the 1970s and catapulted them into the top tiers of pop music. But Tennille and Dragon's response to the victory was relatively modest. They were more concerned with making music than with taking it easy. They stayed committed to their profession despite their newfound fame, wanting to show that they were more than a one-hit wonder. Television stardom. As a result of their popularity as musicians, Captain and Tennille decided to venture into the television industry. The Captain and Tennille Show, a variety show ABC offered them in 1976, ran for a season. They included a combination of live performances, humorous sketches, and famous guest appearances, in contrast to many music-based shows of the time. Viewers were given a closer look at the two's lovely chemistry, with Tennille's vivacious attitude balancing Dragon's guarded but attractive manner. Notable visitors to the show included Muhammad Ali, Vincent Price, and Don Knotts. Even though it wasn't a long-term success, it demonstrated their talents outside of music and cemented their status as household names. Fans of 1970s television adored the show because of its nostalgic appeal and pleasant, joyful tone. Even though Captain and Tennille's variety show ended in 1977, its influence helped solidify their status as one of the most adored musical performers of the time. Iconic songs. Despite their breakthrough single, Love Will Keep Us Together, Captain and Tennille maintained popularity with a series of singles. Their record demonstrated their ability to balance catchy, light-hearted songs and poignant ballads. While Shop Around, a version of the Smokey Robinson classic, gave their repertoire a soulful twist, Muskrat Love emerged as a funny favorite. Do That to Me One More Time, one of their greatest songs, was a sensual ballad with jazz influences that peaked at number 1 in 1979, demonstrating their enduring popularity beyond the mid-1970s. In a time when many performers swiftly faded, their durability came from their ability to create original material and adapt classics. Their hallmark sound, a fusion of pop, soft rock, and love balladry, made their music unique despite changing musical trends. Their tunes, which are romantic, nostalgic, and a little whimsical, are still associated with a distinct period of pop music. Controversial Muskrat Love. Muskrat Love, a 1976 single by Captain and Tennille, is still regarded as one of the most divisive songs in musical history. It was a surprising choice for the duo, as it was initially written by Willis Allen Ramsey and recorded by the band America. However, their rendition, featuring Muskrat-like synthesized sound effects, became a top 5 success. While some admirers found it perplexing, others loved its unique charm. The song was rejected by even the Carpenters, famed for their dreamy, gentle ballads, because it was too odd. Paul McCartney reportedly left a White House performance when they played it for President Gerald Ford, and critics at the time derided the song as frivolous fluff. The song, which reflects their willingness to take chances when pop music became more conventional, is still a staple in their repertoire despite the conflicting responses. Whether or not you like it, Muskrat Love has remained a unique and memorable jewel throughout the duo's career. Their marriage in 1975. Toni Tennille and Daryl Dragon represented love and musical harmony to many admirers. In a modestly lavish private ceremony, they were married on November 11, 1975 in Virginia City, Nevada. Later, Tennille said that they chose to get married on a whim while on tour without the typical pomp of a celebrity wedding. Although their songs extolled romance, their marriage was not without its challenges. In her 2016 memoir, Tennille disclosed feeling dissatisfied due to Dragon's emotional detachment. For decades, they remained committed creative partners despite their difficulties. Fans couldn't understand their connection since, although they appeared to be inseparable on stage, they had serious disagreements off stage. Tennille took care of Dragon in his last years, and despite their eventual 2014 divorce, their relationship remained close. Despite its complexity, their marriage mostly shaped Captain and Tennille's identity. The Captain struggles with emotion. Daryl Dragon frequently had trouble expressing his emotions despite being a musical virtuoso. Tennille's outgoing and loving personality contrasted sharply with his reserved, introverted demeanor. Their disparate temperaments caused a gap in their personal life, even though they benefited their music. According to Tennille, Dragon had a strong love that he could not express or display conventionally. It wasn't until later in life that Tennille realized his inability to connect emotionally was caused by unidentified neurological problems. Dragon's love of music was evident despite his austere demeanor, and his compositions were the true expression of his devotion. Tennille tried to close the emotional distance, but eventually the stress got too great. Nevertheless, she stayed by his side following their divorce, offering support and care until he died in 2019. Deep attachment and an unbridgeable emotional gap characterized their unusual love story. Their iconic duet style. Captain and Tennille had a synergy that few musical duos could equal. Their music had a sophisticated elegance, whereas many pop bands depended on straightforward melodies and harmonies. While Dragon's classical training added a degree of expertise rarely found in pop music to their compositions, Tennille's warm, expressive vocals gave their songs a resonance with listeners. Their relationship felt balanced because each member contributed something different, unlike many duos where one person dominates. Their love ballads had a sophisticated feel thanks to Dragon's elaborate piano work, which was influenced by jazz and classical elements. They stand out from their peers because of their ability to combine sophisticated musicality with pop sensibility. They demonstrated their command of mood and passion in songs like Do That To Me One More Time, demonstrating that they were more than just another 1970s soft rock group. In an era of ephemeral musical trends, their sound is still instantly recognizable, a monument to their unique craftsmanship. The unforgettable Do That To Me One More Time. Although musical tastes were changing by the late 1970s, Captain and Tennille demonstrated their enduring appeal. They solidified their place in pop history in 1979 when Do That To Me One More Time became their second #1 single. Tennille's breathy, personal vocals and Dragon's mellow orchestration created an enticing ambiance in this song, which had a seductive, sophisticated air in contrast to their previous hits. The song, which Tennille wrote entirely, demonstrated her skill as a storyteller and songwriter. Compared to their earlier lively love songs, it offered a more sophisticated and sensual take on romance, which resonated with audiences. The song's success demonstrated that they were a partnership that could change with time rather than being a one-hit wonder. The song is still regarded as a beloved classic today, frequently mentioned in popular culture and recreated by musicians who were moved by its evocative, beautiful melody. Struggles with the record label. Behind the scenes, Captain and Tennille encountered difficulties despite their commercial success. They were first signed to A&M Records, but label management wanted them to follow a specific formula, which caused them to clash. However, the pair refused to record tracks they didn't believe in, insisting instead on creative control. Due to this tension, they signed with Casablanca Records in 1975, which gave them greater creative freedom and brought new challenges. Given Casablanca's reputation for having a disco-heavy lineup that included Kiss and Donna Summer, Captain and Tennille seemed like a strange choice. Even though Do That To Me One More Time was a huge smash, they could not keep up with the industry's move away from soft rock. As the 1980s went on, they found it more challenging to maintain the popularity they had experienced the decade before due to shifting record label politics and musical preferences. Departure from the spotlight. As new wave, punk, and synth pop became more popular during the early 1980s, soft rock groups like Captain and Tennille found it challenging to stay on the charts. Once the pinnacle of romance and charm, their approach suddenly seemed out of step with the more electronic, edgy sounds dominated by the media. After their contract with Casablanca Records expired, they were left without a solid foundation in the evolving industry. They decided to concentrate on smaller projects, play in more intimate settings, and occasionally appear on television rather than pursuing commercial success. Dragon focused on writing and producing, while Tennille experimented with Broadway-style shows. Captain and Tennille gracefully embraced their changing position, unlike many musicians who made valiant attempts to fit in with emerging trends. Although their fan following remained devoted, they were no longer at the top of the Billboard charts. Nevertheless, their music persisted and is still a beloved classic among soft rock fans. The Captain and Tennille Show fades. At the height of the duo's popularity, The Captain and Tennille Show debuted in 1976 and included a variety of comedy routines, musical performances, and celebrity guest appearances. However, All in the Family, a sitcom powerhouse that regularly attracted enormous audiences, was placed directly in competition with the show despite its respectable ratings. After just one season, ABC officials decided to cancel it in the hopes of a ratings miracle. Even though it was disheartening, Tennille subsequently acknowledged in interviews that she never believed that television was her calling. Thus, the show's cancellation wasn't a complete failure. She and Dragon preferred creating music over comic skits and scripted pieces, unlike variety show icons like Sonny and Cher. Even so, there were several standout moments throughout the event, such as duets with celebrities like Bette Midler and Dragon's modest yet endearing demeanor. Although its cancellation signaled the start of their slow withdrawal from the media, they continued to be active in the entertainment industry. Toni Tennille revelation. The tragic reality of Daryl Dragon's life and death is revealed by Toni Tennille's admissions about him, which create a bittersweet portrait of their connection. After over 40 years of marriage, Tennille and Dragon divorced in 2014, yet Tennille never really left Dragon behind. She felt obliged to return to Prescott, where she assumed responsibility for his care and even fired house attendants accused of over-medicating him. She also possessed medical power of attorney. She remained by Dragon's side in his last moments. She granted his final wish to scatter his ashes over Granite Mountain, demonstrating her love for him even after their bitter separation. Tennille also disclosed their marital emotional problems, pointing to Dragon's incapacity to show love as a result of his challenging childhood with a stern father. Dragon acknowledged that she had every cause to leave, but eventually did so for her health. He recognized her efforts even in his last days, demonstrating that even though their marriage dissolved, their relationship remained intact to the very end. Tennille's solo career attempts. Toni Tennille's love of jazz, swing, and big band music extended well beyond her gentle rock songs, and she was always a talented vocalist. She started a solo career in the early 1980s, putting out several jazz recordings that presented her expressive, deep voice in a new way. More Than You Know, 1984, one of her most ambitious efforts, featured her tackling jazz standards with a seductive, elegant sound. The albums did not have significant economic success, even though critics gave them favorable reviews. Fearing listeners would not embrace her outside the pop realm, music execs were reluctant to support her move into a new genre. Tennille, frustrated but unfazed, kept playing jazz at smaller places, finding satisfaction in her true passion. Her solo work established her as a musician with depth and vocal ability well beyond her Captain and Tennille character, even though she never achieved breakthrough success as a jazz performer. Life behind the scenes. Although Captain and Tennille had lost popularity by the late 1980s, they never entirely abandoned music. Tennille found artistic joy in various endeavors, including writing and voiceover work, while Dragon kept up his career as a producer and session musician. In search of a more sedate, private existence away from the demands of Hollywood, they finally relocated to Prescott, Arizona. Their personal lives were more complicated, but their careers had slowed. Despite their marriage's underlying emotional problems, Tennille took up the role of caregiver when Dragon started to experience health problems. Although the couple was still very close, it was getting more difficult to overlook the rifts in their relationship. They were two people negotiating the reality of age, health issues, and the complications of a long-term relationship that wasn't as ideal as it seemed. They were no longer the youthful, carefree couple singing, "Love will keep us together." The private reality of their marriage. Captain and Tennille portrayed themselves as a devoted, inseparable pair for many years, whose passion was evident in their songs. However, their marriage was more problematic when they were behind closed doors. Despite their success in the workplace, Tennille subsequently disclosed in her 2016 memoir that she felt alone because of Dragon's emotionally aloof demeanor. Despite their strong link, he found it difficult to show her the kind of love she required. It was challenging for them to connect outside of music because of his introverted attitude, which is sometimes misconstrued as aloofness. Tennille once called their relationship lonely but not loveless. Despite her best efforts to connect with Dragon over the years, he remained reclusive and preferred to express himself musically rather than verbally. Despite these difficulties, they continued their collaboration, united by mutual respect and history. Their tales served as a warning that relationships, no matter how ideal, can have hidden complications. Divorce after 39 years. Toni Tennille startled fans in 2014 by divorcing Daryl Dragon after over 40 years of marriage. Many were shocked by the news. How could a couple who had performed "Love Will Keep Us Together" for decades ultimately say goodbye? Although she still had great affection for Dragon, Tennille later revealed that their marriage had been emotionally draining for a long time. She hoped that by ending the marriage, they would have a better shot at happiness. Their relationship did not, however, end with their breakup. Tennille stayed by Dragon's side even after the divorce, caring for him while his health deteriorated. She expressed her continued affection for him in interviews, albeit differently. By transforming their connection from romantic lovers to lifelong friends, they demonstrated that love doesn't always fall into a predetermined category. Daryl Dragon's health decline. Daryl Dragon's health deteriorated following their divorce. He could not easily play the keyboards he had once mastered due to a neurological issue impairing his performance. Even though she was no longer his wife, Tennille took charge to ensure he got attention. To be near him and support him throughout his daily hardships and doctor's appointments, she returned to Arizona. Despite the dissolution of their marriage, their shared past forged an unbreakable friendship. For a man who had committed his life to music, Dragon's health problems became a devastating reality. He felt reassured that Tennille was still there for him, even though he could no longer perform. Despite his gradual decline, he was thankful for the love and care he received in his last years. Daryl Dragon's passing. Daryl Dragon died of renal failure on January 2, 2019, at the age of 76. In his last moments, Tennille was by his side, clutching his hand. She disclosed in a heartfelt statement following his death that his final words to her were replete with appreciation. There was love and gratitude for their trip together, despite the emotional distance that had characterized much of their relationship. For admirers of Captain and Tennille, Dragon's passing signaled the end of an era, yet their music endures. During a period when love songs dominated the radio, their singles like Love Will Keep Us Together and Do That To Me One More Time are now cherished classics. Despite the highs and lows of their journey, Captain and Tennille established a musical legacy that still resonates with listeners today. Toni Tennille's tribute to Dragon. Following Daryl Dragon's death in 2019, Toni Tennille talked candidly about their close but complex relationship. She acknowledged that although their marriage had not been personally rewarding, they had an extraordinary artistic partnership. Tennille remembered holding Dragon's hand as he passed away quietly in his last days and telling him he was loved. She said he was a good-hearted, talented musician whose relationship was challenging due to his emotional expression issues. Tennille emphasized that music had always been their most excellent bond and that she never regretted their time together despite their ups and downs. As they had done on stage for decades, she sang softly to him in his final moments. She made sure his contributions to music were remembered by carrying on his memory after his passing. Even though their love story was far from ideal, their mutual love of music left a legacy that would last long after their hardships were over. Their last public appearance together. 3 years after their divorce, Toni Tennille and Daryl Dragon unexpectedly made a rare public appearance together in 2017. When the pair reconnected for a special event honoring their contributions to music, fans were ecstatic. They sat side by side, laughing and reminiscing about their time in the spotlight, even though they were no longer romantically linked. Dragon, who had been struggling with health problems, seemed weak but content, while Tennille talked passionately about their shared career. Their chemistry remained clear, demonstrating that despite the difficulties in their relationship, their musical affinity was indestructible. Fans got a last look at Captain and Tennille together at the reunion, reminding them of their influence on the music business. It was a fitting homage to a collaboration that had characterized an era of passionate, sincere pop music, even though it was their final public appearance as a duo. Captain and Tennille's enduring legacy. Captain and Tennille's music is still a mainstay of classic pop and soft rock, even in the face of changing musical trends. Songs like Do That To Me One More Time and Love Will Keep Us Together are still played on radio stations, streaming sites, and even the soundtracks of motion pictures. Their music has also been rediscovered by younger generations through nostalgic playlists and social media, thanks to its distinctive blend of romance and infectious songs. Beyond their popularity on the charts, their impact can be observed in contemporary duos that combine musical collaborations with personal ties. In subsequent interviews, Tennille herself has expressed awe at the longevity of their songs. She admits that despite the highs and lows of their career, millions of people were delighted by their songs. Captain and Tennille's ability to write timeless, sincere melodies guarantees that they will always be remembered in pop culture, demonstrating that love songs are always in style. The influence of the Beach Boys on their career. Mike Love dubbed Daryl Dragon Captain Keyboard during his years as the Beach Boys pianist on tour before he founded Captain and Tennille. Later, this moniker was the basis for the Captain character that characterized his Tennille career. The Beach Boys influenced Captain and Tennille's music, especially their sun-soaked tunes and rich vocal harmonies. Their bond with the iconic band was further cemented when Tennille herself provided backing vocals on a few of the Beach Boys' recordings. Dragon learned new recording methods and performing styles during his time with the ensemble, which he eventually applied to his compositions. There were traces of the Beach Boys' rich, harmony-driven sound, even in their biggest song, Love Will Keep Us Together. Dragon's experience with the Beach Boys served as a basis for Captain and Tennille's distinctive sound and success, even as they carved out their musical path. Their unexpected connection to Pink Floyd. Their indirect link between Captain and Tennille and Pink Floyd is among the most unexpected details in their past. Despite being most recognized for their lively love songs, Daryl Dragon had a history in progressive and experimental music, which briefly came into contact with a renowned rock group. Before Captain and Tennille became well known in the early 1970s, Dragon was a studio musician in Los Angeles. He had a few side projects simultaneously as Pink Floyd was recording. Although a complete partnership is not officially documented, there have been recurring reports that Dragon's keyboard prowess was previously considered for specific experimental sessions. Despite their divergent musical tastes, Dragon could have been a helpful addition because of his technical proficiency with keyboards and synths. This lost connection demonstrates his versatility as a musician. Dragon's musical inspirations extended well beyond soft pop, despite Captain and Tennille's association with that genre. Toni Tennille's memoir. Tennille published Toni Tennille, a memoir, a very intimate chronicle of her life and career in 2016. Fans anticipated behind-the-scenes glimpses from her musical career, but her openness about her marriage to Daryl Dragon grabbed their interest. She said that their relationship was frequently emotional and lonely, even if they had chemistry on stage. Tennille suffered over the years as a result of Dragon's intimacy and communication issues, despite his extraordinary abilities. She was cautious, though, to emphasize his musical genius rather than cast him in a bad light. The book also explored her problems with self-identity outside of their pair. The memoir was praised for being open and vulnerable, giving readers a fresh look at an ideal relationship. It humanized Tennille and Dragon instead of devaluing their legacy, demonstrating that even the most adored musical couples deal with personal struggles off-screen. The impact of the disco era. Soft rock had become less favored by the late 1970s as disco music dominated the radio. Unlike some of their peers, Captain and Tennille never really embraced the disco craze, despite their best efforts to adapt. They found switching challenging because their music was always based more on romance, melody, and narrative than dance beats. Although they experimented with somewhat more lively arrangements, their distinctive soft pop sound persisted. Captain and Tennille's commercial success declined as the business preferred performers with a strong disco component. They did, however, continue to make music and have a devoted fan base, in contrast to some musicians who utterly disappeared. Although she enjoyed disco, Tennille later acknowledged that it never suited their aesthetic. Their music persevered amid shifting trends, demonstrating that meaningful, skillfully written songs can outlive even the most popular musical fads. How they avoided the one-hit wonder label. Captain and Tennille developed a hit library that maintained them in the public eye, unlike many 1970s duos that faded after a single chart topper. Their most famous song was Love Will Keep Us Together, but they went on to have more top 10 successes, including Muskrat Love, an oddball smash that became a pop culture sensation. Their resilience was also greatly influenced by their capacity for adaptation. They demonstrated that they were more than just a one-trick pony with songs like Do That To Me One More Time and Neil Sedaka's poignant Lonely Night, Angel Face. Their music was featured in movies, ads, and even reality TV decades later, bridging the gap between generations. Captain and Tennille's tunes are instantly recognizable, guaranteeing their legacy as more than just a passing moment in music history, in contrast to one-hit wonders who fade from public memory. Daryl Dragon's unique hat collection. Daryl Dragon's signature was his captain's hat, which was more than just an ornament. Many fans are unaware that he possessed a sizable collection of captain's caps, each with its distinctive patterns and decorations. Some were made especially for special performances, while others were gifted to him by loyal admirers. Dragon was so passionate about his collection that he would choose his hats carefully depending on the situation. Tennille once joked that he had a hat for every mood, whether romantic, serious, or playful. The hats became an extension of his theatrical persona, lending a sense of mystery to his presence despite his reserved nature. Dragon maintained his distinctive style throughout the years, which became an enduring aspect of his image, in contrast to other artists who changed their appearance. Even in his later years, he hardly ever left his iconic headgear on when he spoke in public or gave interviews. The reason behind Dragon's mysterious persona. For many fans, Daryl Dragon was a mystery since he was shy, quiet, and constantly buried behind his computer. Dragon would instead let his music speak for itself, unlike Toni Tennille, who flourished in the spotlight. Those who knew him well characterized him as a kind, considerate, and intensely committed to his work, even though his introverted personality occasionally gave the impression that he was aloof. His enigmatic appeal was enhanced because he was not one for gaudy interviews or small conversation. He had always been silent, despite some followers speculating that this was a feature of his captain character. In her memoir, Tennille acknowledged that Dragon struggled to communicate his feelings verbally, but gave everything to his music. He was one of the most fascinating characters in pop music history because of his stage presence, which was marked by a laser-like intensity on his instruments and an almost supernatural aura. Their connection to reality TV. Even though Captain and Tennille's music dates back to the 1970s, reality television gave it a fresh lease on life in the 2000s. Their songs were regularly featured on shows like American Idol and Dancing with the Stars, which exposed a new generation to their love tunes. While Do That to Me One More Time was frequently utilized in dramatic love scenes, Love Will Keep Us Together became a favorite choice for episodes with a wedding theme. Tennille even turned down an invitation to serve as a guest judge on a singing competition because she wanted to avoid the spotlight of reality TV. She did admit, though, that these performances kept their music current. Their iconic music continued to appeal to listeners decades after its first release, as seen by the rise in streaming and digital downloads. Even during a time when new music predominated, Captain and Tennille's enduring appeal made them a beloved component of mainstream culture. The Captain's secret love for jazz. Even though Captain and Tennille were most recognized for their polished pop hits, Daryl Dragon had a profound and enduring love for jazz. He was a pianist with classical training who marveled at the improvisational skill of jazz greats like Oscar Peterson and Bill Evans. Although he had to stay in the pop genre for his role in Captain and Tennille, he frequently dabbled with jazz arrangements and wrote complex piano pieces behind the scenes that were never included on their recordings. This enthusiasm was shared by Tennille, who went on to pursue jazz music as a solo artist. In contrast to their well-known radio-friendly songs, the couple frequently performed jazz standards in private for their pleasure. Jazz subtly influenced Dragon's music, particularly in some of their less well-known songs' intricate chord progressions and lush keyboard textures. Many people were unaware of his jazz background, a hidden aspect of his ability. Their unexpected influence on modern artists. Although Captain and Tennille's music may appear from a bygone era, it nonetheless impacts modern mainstream culture. Their nostalgic, upbeat aesthetic has inspired the work of artists such as Bruno Mars and Meghan Trainor. In interviews, Taylor Swift mentioned their creative process and praised their ability to write catchy, passionate love songs. Their influence goes beyond simply musical taste. Many contemporary musicians aim to imitate their recordings' cozy, classic sound. Love Will Keep Us Together continues to serve as a model for the contagious, energetic love songs that continue to top the charts. Their ongoing popularity has also been aided by their music's comeback in movies and advertisements, demonstrating that their distinctive fusion of romance and melody never fails to enthrall new audiences. Despite coming out at a different period, Captain and Tennille's influence can still be heard in contemporary pop music. Toni Tennille's return to jazz. Toni Tennille's passion was jazz long before Captain and Tennille became a pop sensation. After leaving popular music, she returned to her origins, putting out highly regarded jazz albums in the 1980s and 1990s. Her slick vocals were first heard by her pop career fans in the songs More Than You Know, 1984, and Things Are Swingin', 1994. She honored jazz luminaries such as Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, performing timeless tunes with a skill demonstrating that she was much more than a pop singer. She continued to perform at small jazz clubs, far from the stadiums of her Captain and Tennille days, even though these records didn't reach the top of the charts. For Tennille, getting back into jazz wasn't about making money. It was about rediscovering the music that had always held the most excellent place in her heart. The hidden meaning behind their biggest hit. Although the truth differed, many fans thought Love Will Keep Us Together was an autobiographical song reflecting Captain and Tennille's romance. Although Tennille's tender, sincere performance made the song seem intimate, Neil Sedaka and Howard Greenfield's marriage wasn't as perfect as the lyrics implied. Despite the song's positive message, Tennille eventually disclosed that she and Dragon had an emotionally distant relationship. She frequently felt alone because Dragon found it difficult to show affection outside of music. Ironically, despite the failure of their marriage, their most well-known song came to represent enduring love. Tennille acknowledged that, in retrospect, singing Love Will Keep Us Together occasionally made her feel sad because she knew their relationship was far weaker than the song's lyrics suggested. Millions still find the song an anthem of devotion, demonstrating that music can transcend even the performer's realities. How they almost didn't record Do That To Me One More Time. Despite being one of Captain and Tennille's greatest songs, Do That To Me One More Time almost didn't make it to the studio. Tennille poured her feelings into the song's lyrics when writing it at a trying period in her marriage. She was afraid it might not fit their established image because of its sensuous and begging tone, so she was reluctant to record it. Dragon praised the melody's ethereal softness and immediately fell in love. His excitement persuaded Tennille to record it. The song was made available in 1979. It was their final significant hit on the Billboard charts and their second #1 single. The song's gloomy yet romantic vibe struck a chord with listeners, signaling a change in the band's musical themes toward more mature ones. In retrospect, the song's success seems even more heartbreaking because many fans later conjectured that it represented Tennille's desire for a closer bond in her marriage. Tennille's brief time on Broadway. Before starting Captain and Tennille, Toni Tennille aspired to be a Broadway actress. She was cast in Mother Earth, a rock musical that briefly debuted in New York in the early 1970s. Although she enjoyed playing on stage, she soon realized that Broadway's unpredictable nature wasn't for her. It was a thrilling but eye-opening experience. Tennille was left at a crossroads when the show concluded earlier than anticipated. She met Daryl Dragon about this time, and their musical synergy led to a new direction in her career. In retrospect, Tennille attributed her brief time on Broadway to developing her vocal control and stage presence, which became crucial to Captain and Tennille's live performances. Despite her short tenure on Broadway, it provided her with the self-assurance to pursue music differently, one that would ultimately lead to her global recognition. Daryl Dragon's unusual diet. Although Daryl Dragon was well known for his reserved manner, his extremely particular diet was another little-known oddity. Tennille used to joke that he ate like a machine, never getting bored of the same dishes even after sticking to them for weeks or months. His favorite meals were fundamental and frequently included grilled fish, steamed veggies, and plain rice. In contrast to Tennille, who enjoyed trying out new flavors and foods, he showed little interest in trying out different cuisines. Dragon graciously declined every dish at a dinner party, choosing instead to eat a plate of simple rice with soy sauce, she said. Tennille considered his eating habits a natural aspect of his routine-driven and regimented mentality, but others thought they were strange. His dislike of complex or expensive dishes was another example of his quiet and unassuming personality, which was centered on routine, music, and avoiding pointless distractions. The true reason behind their move to Arizona. Fans were taken aback when Captain and Tennille moved to Prescott, Arizona in the late 1990s, abandoning their glitzy California lifestyle. Although they publicly claimed they wanted a more sedate lifestyle, the true motivation was far more intimate. The arid temperature of Arizona was suggested as a remedy for Dragon's neurological condition, which had started to interfere with his performance. As his caregiver, Tennille ensured he got the steadiness and tranquility he required. Their marriage also underwent a sea change due to the relocation. Their emotional detachment grew even more pronounced in the absence of the demands of the music business. Tennille subsequently acknowledged that she became aware of how profoundly unhappy she was in their relationship, even though they continued to be together for years following the transfer. She stayed at Dragon's side till his death, despite their final divorce, demonstrating that their complicated relationship was never entirely severed. Tennille's close friendship with Carol Burnett. Despite coming from opposite backgrounds in entertainment, Toni Tennille and Carol Burnett developed a close friendship that lasted for many years. Tennille made several appearances on The Carol Burnett Show, adding her usual warmth and comedy to the variety show. The two became close behind the scenes because they loved acting and telling stories. Burnett frequently urged Tennille to look into more television chances because she predicted her ability to balance her musical career and humorous side. Through their ups and downs, both personally and professionally, the two stayed close and supported one another. Later, Tennille praised Burnett, describing her as one of the business's most sincere and encouraging individuals. In response, Burnett commended Tennille's fortitude, particularly when confronted with personal difficulties. Their friendship was evidence of the strength of respect between two gifted women who, despite their divergent career choices, discovered a shared love of entertaining crowds. Why they never had children. Tennille said it was difficult for them to forego having children, even after over 40 years of marriage. Although she had always seen herself as a mother, she began to doubt whether Dragon would be a loving and involved father due to his aloof demeanor. It was difficult to fathom raising a child with him because he was so devoted to music and frequently spent hours alone. Although it was still a persistent regret, Tennille finally accepted that motherhood was not in her future. She acknowledged in her memoir that she occasionally pondered how her life might have turned out if she had taken a different route. Even so, she found happiness in friendships, music, and her intense love of animals, especially her cherished dogs, whom she frequently called her furry children. Although she never had children, she left a loving legacy through her music. The final Captain and Tennille album. Although it was very different from their previous work, Captain and Tennille's final album, More Than Dancing, was released in 2006. It demonstrated Tennille's profound appreciation for big band arrangements and traditional classics with a strong jazz and swing influence. This album seemed more personal than their pop successes that topped the charts, demonstrating the duo's development as a band. Tennille was still quite pleased with the project, even though it didn't become a significant commercial success, because it was distributed independently. Since it allowed her to experiment with musical genres she had long loved, she saw it as a creative and personal victory. Later discovering fans were taken aback by the album's sophisticated elegance and Tennille's powerful vocals. Given the emotional distance that characterized her relationship with Dragon, several songs, like the poignant More Than You Know, sounded nearly autobiographical in hindsight. Even though it didn't top the charts, More Than Dancing is a well-regarded track from their career. The truth about their divorce settlement. Many people believe Tennille's 2014 divorce filing from Dragon would be a contentious and protracted judicial struggle. After all, they had been together for almost 40 years, and acrimonious arguments over money and property are frequently a part of high-profile celebrity divorces. In a startling turn of events, though, their separation was cordial. Tennille made it apparent that she did not intend to leave Dragon in a precarious situation or look for financial gain. She ensured he was well taken care of, even assisting him in finding a cozy place to live in Arizona. Tennille took care of him even after they divorced, notably as his health deteriorated because of a neurological condition. Tennille had never abandoned him, even though their relationship had always been complicated. She acknowledged in subsequent interviews that they still cared for one another in their unique ways, even though their love story didn't have a conventional happy ending. Their unfinished songs. Captain and Tennille's love for music never diminished, even if they formally stopped releasing new recordings in 2006. They continued to write songs together, some of which were never released, even in their older years. Dragon had innumerable incomplete songs on digital files or cassette recordings as a meticulous arranger. Since then, Tennille has disclosed that several songs, many of which express their feelings and hardships, remain unheard by the general audience. While some of these songs were nearly finished, others were only fragments. Tennille considered putting out a posthumous album in Dragon's honor after he died in 2019. She is still unsure if they should be published because Dragon was infamously secretive about his work. Nevertheless, supporters hope these unreleased recordings will be made public, offering a last look at the pair's timeless musical chemistry. How the digital age revived their popularity. Despite dominating the 1970s with their best successes, Captain and Tennille's music never disappeared. Their music has reached a whole new audience due to the growth of streaming services like YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Their most well-known song, Love Will Keep Us Together, has received millions of spins and has introduced their distinctive sound to new generations. Additionally, their music is regularly featured in nostalgic TV series, ads, and motion pictures, which rekindles interest in their discography. Social media has also aided their comeback, where supporters have shared behind-the-scenes photos, performances, and rare interviews. It's interesting to note that even Do That To Me One More Time, which was regarded as a farewell success before, has gained new respect from contemporary listeners. The emotional themes in their songs are eternal, even though their music can seem like a holdover from the 1970s. Great music never really dies, as evidenced by the fact that Captain and Tennille are still being discovered decades after their prime. Tennille's life today. Toni Tennille lives a quiet, private life in Florida after working in the music business for decades. After years of fame, she has adopted a more subdued lifestyle, concentrating on writing, painting, and occasionally giving small-scale performances. In interviews, she has also become more open about the highs and lows of her marriage and work. Tennille has publicly said she wishes she had put her emotional health first earlier in life, even though she wouldn't swap her musical accomplishment for anything. Even after their breakup, she continues to guard Dragon's legacy, ensuring his musical achievements are never overlooked. She still gets messages from people moved by her song, and fans still see her at local events. Tennille may no longer be at the top of the charts, but her influence lives on. She is still a well-liked personality in popular culture, which is evidence of the enduring impact of music and individual fortitude. Dragon's last words to Tennille. Daryl Dragon and Toni Tennille had a strong friendship that persisted till the end of their complicated marriage. Tennille said heartbreakingly that Dragon's last words to her before he died in 2019 were, "I always loved you." Although their relationship had been characterized by emotional distance, Tennille never anticipated the sense of closure these words brought. Dragon had trouble communicating his emotions over their decades-long relationship, ultimately leading to their breakup. But he ensured Tennille knew in his last moments that he had always secretly loved her. She subsequently revealed that those statements gave her a great sense of calm and reassured her that their bond had been genuine despite their struggles. Although Dragon's death signaled the end of an era, his final words to Tennille demonstrated that love, in all of its complex manifestations, never really goes away. The lasting impact of Captain and Tennille. Even if Captain and Tennille aren't performing, their influence remains. Their songs are regularly included in movies, TV shows, and advertisements, and their music is still played on radio stations worldwide. Beyond their music, their love story has captivated people for decades. It is full of heartache and victories. They prove that relationships aren't always ideal, especially in the glamorous realm of pop success. They were among the most fascinating musical duos because they combined creative genius and emotional hardships. Their music has endured, even though their marriage did not. One of the most well-known songs from the 1970s is still "Love Will Keep Us Together," which instantly takes listeners back to the heyday of soft rock. Despite their ups and downs, Captain and Tennille's influence on music and the emotions of their fans will endure for many years.
If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon